publicly accused the couple of trying to pull off a hoax.
Mr. Quinn and Ms. Huskins has plundered valuable resources away from our community and has taken the focus away from the true victims of our community.
But then, pretty soon after, Denise's attorney gets a copy of yet another email the kidnappers sent to the Chronicle, and it's just like straight up bizarre. With them describing themselves as college-educated career criminals, even drawing comparisons to the crew from Ocean's 11, and saying that they only abducted Denise as training for more high-profile targets. Also saying she wasn't even the intended person, saying they were actually looking for Aaron's ex-fiance. With them then going on to explain they actually felt so bad about that, and so that's why they let her go. But that's also not where it's done, because then they also sent another letter to the Chronicle threatening the Vallejo police if they didn't apologize to Denise, saying, quote, "We cannot stand to see two good people thrown under the bus by the police and media when Miss Victim F and Mr. Victim M should have received only support and sympathy." So it's all weird as all hell, but get this, we're still not done, because everything changed again 3 months later when another home invasion case eerily similar to Denise and Aaron's story popped up near Vallejo. It was another attempted kidnapping. But this time the couple fought off the intruder who dropped his phone before running away. Friends of the police were able to trace the device back to 38-year-old ex-Marine and Harvard Law School graduate Matthew Mueller. And get this, inside his home and car, they found Aaron's laptop as well as a pair of duct tape goggles with blonde hair. So ultimately, that piece of shit gets 40 years in prison. Those victims say, that's not enough, especially because Denise and Aaron claim that there was more than one kidnapper, right? So we're talking about potentially co-conspirators still at large. So I guess there is a silver lining for Denise and Aaron, right? They ended up getting $2.5 million as part of a settlement in their lawsuit against Vallejo police. But still, it could be argued that it is hard to put a price tag on this level of trauma, harassment, defamation, but it is better than nothing, all things considered. But I think the final thing that fucks with my head about this story is that seemingly the monster or monsters who terrorized these people, put Denise through this nightmare, they were seemingly so much more empathetic than the police, who victimized Aaron and Denise, tried to assassinate their character, actually successfully for a long time, and after all said and done, they give out a sheepish whoopsie. Because understand, I'm trying to make this situation consumable for you in, my daily show format. Watch a documentary on this. Deep dive into this situation. You will be fucking livid if you're not already. But that's where we're going to leave this one for today, and I gotta pass a question off to you. What are your thoughts here? Let me know in those comments down below. And then in social media news, we have YouTube going after what's been described as the cult of Andrew Tate, with YouTube now removing even more channels that are promoting Tate's The Real World program, and that notably after a Vice investigation detailed alleged predatory practices, with Vice saying that the program, which has subscriptions that start at $49 a month, has critics who claim that the platform targets and exploits young men and teens by promising them money and success if they commit enough time and money to the real world, which advertises itself as the most advanced financial education platform where you escape the trappings of the Matrix. One former member claiming they spent up to 16 hours a day making social media videos to promote Tate, saying though he's out now and he feels like he escaped a cult. And these bans that we're now seeing, they're just the latest actions being taken. As we talked about in the past, Google and Apple took the Real World app out of their app stores. YouTube also said it previously took down channels associated with Tate and the program, though you advised saying there were still accounts with hundreds of thousands of subscribers that pushed it still up. So now YouTube has banned a handful of new accounts, including ones called out in Vice's article. And as far as the official reasoning for the ban, there are different ones. You had a spokesperson saying it's against the terms of service to prominently feature content from a previously terminated user, and adding that another was banned for violating the scam, spam, and deceptive practices policies. And then, I am so sorry we accidentally sent you to prison. That is what this tech company right now is saying to hundreds of people. Though to understand this, we gotta jump back to 1999, because that's when the British Post Office started using the Fujitsu Horizon IT system to automate sales accounting, which sounds boring and sanitary enough, but shortly after it was implemented, local post office managers or sub-postmasters noticed that money was seemingly going missing, and the state-owned post office took the side of the massive tech company, saying, hey, this software, it is reliable, and the money missing was obviously the fault of the postal workers. And so between 1999 and 2015, more than 900 sub-postmasters were prosecuted for theft and false accounting, and 700 were convicted of criminal offenses. Right, so some went to prison, many were financially ruined, and some even took their own lives because of this. And again, these prosecutions were based on the Fujitsu Horizon software, which, lil whoopsie, turned out to be full of bugs and defects. So in 2016, a group of these postal workers sued the post office, with it then taking the High Court in London another 3 years to find that the Horizon system was buggy and that the post office actually knew. And following that legal win, hundreds of sub-postmasters came forward. So far, reportedly, only 93 convictions have been overturned. And understand, these convictions have been called the greatest miscarriage of justice in British history. And that's not some random being hyperbolic. That is literally how the government has described it. And so following the 2019 win for the sub-postmasters, public inquiry was launched in 2020 that'll determine who's responsible for this insane clusterfuck. This has also gotten a lot of attention because of a recent TV drama, with it centered around the impact on the sub-postmasters' lives, and it's caused massive public outrage, even prompting Prime Minister Rishi Sunak to announce plans for Parliament to quash hundreds of these convictions. And also this week, we ended up seeing the tech company actually apologize for their part, with the head of their European division, Paul Patterson, saying to a committee this week,
"We were involved from the very start. We did have bugs and errors in the system, and we did help the post office in their prosecutions of the sub-postmasters. For that, we are truly sorry.
Even the company's global chief executive apologized as well, saying, Fujitsu has apologized for the impact on the postmasters' lives and their families. And over 2,500 sub-postmasters have received compensation from the government in connection with this. So that's also been bogged down with delays, and many also say it's not enough, and arguing that Fujitsu should absolutely be on the hook. And Patterson, Fujitsu's own, agrees, saying, I think there is a moral obligation for the company to contribute. We have a part to play and to contribute to the redress fund for the sub-postmasters. But right now, we don't know what that's actually going to look like. Patterson just saying that once the public inquiry concludes, they'll sit down with the government and discuss exactly how much the company needs to pay out, which my response is whatever number gets thrown out there, more, and then maybe more again, and then why not a little more on top of that? Also, notably, while the version that they use has been updated since this whole fucking nightmare, the CEO of the post office has also declared to lawmakers their intention of getting off Horizon IT system, saying it's outdated, it's clunky, it's old, but it does what it's meant to do. We will be getting off Horizon, and that is our intent. Also, there's another question here that needs answer. If the money reported in the Horizon system was never actually missing, what happened to the real money that the sub-postmasters paid to cover the loss? And there, infuriatingly, the post office CEO said they don't know. But Sky News reported that there is actually a chance it went to numeration packages for executives. Like, this is the kind of shit that makes you want to tear it all down. When you're Joe Blow, it's a crime. If you're in a power position, it's a fine. This isn't spilt milk. This isn't broken China. People's lives were lost and ruined. The fuckheads responsible for this should be dragged from their beds as they cling to their silk sheets. Or not. I might just be hangry. I'm gonna go get a Snickers and then I'll get back to you. I get a little dictatory when I'm hungry. Also, for legal reasons, everything I just said, I'm being hyperbolic and or sarcastic. Moving on. And then there's even more news that we gotta talk about today, but I gotta take a second to pay some bills, because you're making travel plans for the new year yet? Well, something to keep in mind when you start to book your travel is that when you're looking for the best rates on flights, hotel rooms, rental cars, all that, companies can actually increase prices for returning website visitors, hoping that you'll purchase out of fear that you're gonna see the prices rise even more. And hotels or airlines can offer cheaper tickets to people in their home country. And then alternatively, prices spike when interest suddenly increases. But the sponsor of today's show, NordVPN, or more directly, nordvpn.com/Phil, they can help. Nord encrypts your network, allowing you to route through one of many servers around the globe. You know, we think of VPNs as an additional privacy and security layer, which they are, but also consider using them to save on your travel. Simply connect to another region or a country server and see what's available and how prices change. You might find yourself very surprised by what you find. And know that Nord's also working to keep your online activity secure wherever you log on. So take control of your internet experience today. Go to nordvpn.com/Phil to get a huge discount on a 2-year plan, plus an additional 4 months free. That's nordvpn.com/Phil, the best deal on the internet, and it's risk-free with Nord's 30-day money-back guarantee. And then we need to talk about stolen babies, fraudulent paperwork, and years of lies, because those are the reasons we're seeing some Nordic countries now moving to stop their citizens from adopting kids overseas. With the first country to bail on the industry being Sweden, which halted adoptions from South Korea late last year over paperwork concerns. Then this last Tuesday, Denmark's overseas adoption agency announcing that it'd be winding down its international operations. And then that quickly followed by the Norwegian government announcing they're halting things until they conduct an investigation. Right? Because for years, many people who have been adopted from places like South Africa, the Philippines, South Korea, and more, they've been shouting from the rooftops that their paper trails are full of fraud and just don't make sense. And looking into it, it's because often corners were cut, at times to just make the adoption faster, other times trying to hide the origin, which then often makes it hard for kids to find their biological families. But in other cases, it's far more malicious. Like, for example, you have kids being registered as abandoned, only for it to be later discovered they actually had living relatives in their native countries that would have taken them in. And in another case, where there was an investigation by a Norwegian paper finding that in the Philippines, where many of these overseas adoptions are happening, some kids were just flat out sold and given fake birth certificates, which is why we're now seeing things like the head of the Norwegian Directorate for Children, Youth, and Family Affairs saying adoptions must be safe, sound, and in the best interest of the child, and adding our assessment is that the risk of illegalities is real. And so, of course, with this, the question is, well, what happens from here? And as far as Norway, they said that as far as cases in the middle of the pipeline, they're going to be allowed to finish. So it's unclear if the same is going to happen in Denmark. There's also the question of, well, how many people is this going to affect? And actually, as it turns out, fewer than you might expect, because while thousands of people may have been affected over the decades, it's actually less common for overseas adoptions to happen nowadays. Right? Many countries actually generally prefer for adoptions to happen domestically, which is also why the international industry has seen a major downturn. Right? Denmark's only overseas adoption agency, they used to do upwards of 500 of these a year in the 70s, but now it's like only 20 to 40 a year. So that's not to say that the investigation and changes are not necessary, because if any of those 20 to 40 involves a child literally being sold, that's one too many. And then the response by law enforcement to the Uvalde mass shooting, it was a failure and more kids could have been saved if the officers had responded differently. That is no longer just my personal opinion. But what the Department of Justice is saying in their long-awaited and absolutely scathing report on the Uvalde massacre. With them releasing the report this morning, it's nearly 600 pages long, and it largely confirms what we knew from the state investigation, which outlined how miscommunication, confusion, and a lack of leadership led to a delayed response. And that's even though more than 370 local, state, and federal law enforcement officials responded to the shooting that left 21 people dead, including 19 children. With the DOJ specifically describing cascading failures of leadership, decision-making tactics, policy, and training that allowed the attacker to remain in the school for 77 minutes before police finally stormed the classrooms. With the report, and Attorney General Merrick Garland both